podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Welcome back to this third week in our Lenten series. We're so happy to have you back with us. And this week we're looking at the book of Numbers, chapter 21, verses 4 to 9, which is the story of the bronze snake. If you're familiar with Father Dave Favanka, he's the current president of Franciscan University and has had ministries like The Wild Goose. He has this great line from an old series of his called Freedom that says, the source of our suffering becomes the focus of our faith. And he says this in reference to this particular passage and how it prefigures Christ on the cross and how we have to come to the cross, which is this place of suffering and pain and sin, but also the place of salvation and love and glory. So these are all of the things that we're talking about this week, and we're excited to have you with us.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Hey, Nicole.
Erin, you're just making this hilarious face.
It was an excited face, like, so
Erin,
good.
Yeah. But you also were sticking your tongue out a little bit, which was delightful. Yeah.
And my eyes were very large. I realized when I looked at myself, I was like, I look terrifying now and not excited for life. This is a weird look.
Super random, but there's a show on Netflix called Upload. It's an interesting premise. It's like these people, instead of dying, they have a choice like right before they die to like upload their consciousness into a computer reality, and they live in this digital reality. It's a really interesting concept, and they have to like pay for it though. So it's like only the rich people get to upload, and it's a whole kind of situation. But anyways, is this like they were poking fun of at really just stupid rich people purchases, I guess, sometimes. And one of the uploads is visiting with somebody else who hasn't seen them in a long time, and they're like, oh my gosh, you look so pretty. And she's kind of a bimbo character, and she's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, I had my tongue lengthened. And then she sticks her tongue out. It's like a digital, so they can alter whatever, right? And I was like, it just made me think of that one.
It's weird.
It's funny that you say that, because I was listening to an actual interview on CBC the other day about
real life.
Like I just random turned the radio on, and there was this guy talking about basically exactly that, like how you can they're working on like downloading your persona into a computer so that after you die, you would basically like this persona of you, this like copy of you would be able to interact with people.
Weird.
And I was like,
that's
driving. I was
weird.
like, Jesus, you have to come. You have to come soon, please. Please
come now, please.
Just come now.
This is too weird. This is
too much.
Gosh, that is too weird.
That's good.
Is too weird.
That is too weird. Okay, before we get too long into this tangential conversation about the state of the world, hi everybody. I'm Nicole, and would you like to introduce yourselves really quickly?
Yes, I'm Erin,
and I'm
nice
Rachel. Yeah, hi guys.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Okay, so we are recording our episode in our Lenten series today, but we happen to be recording on St. Patrick's Day. And so I was wondering, how do you guys celebrate St. Patrick's Day? Erin, you're a little bit Irish, aren't you?
Yeah. So my last name, Kinsella, which is like I was going to say anglicized version, but that's dumb because the Irish speak English. But I mean, when you talk about, anyways, my name, if you're in Ireland, I think is Kinsella. So I've been told, as opposed to Kinsella, which makes sense. Yeah. I still have not been though, but
does it like mean something? Like woman, kinswoman or something?
I have no idea. But Erin means Ireland. So
wow.
My sister's name is Kelly, which is also Irish.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know Erin meant Ireland.
And peace, apparently. Which makes me laugh a little bit because I'm pretty like boisterous for having a name that means.
Yeah, I get it. You're not like Erin.
That's right. It's not really Zen, but whatever. Okay.
I love it. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do then for St. Patty's Day? Like, do you have any crazy traditions?
So Not gonna lie, in university, it used to be just obviously it's like a big excuse for everybody who's not Irish to be Irish for the day. So,
Yeah.
a friend of mine and I, for like a number of years in university, would start like early in the morning. We go have a big greasy breakfast, and then we would just go to bars all day and
Right.
just drink green beer. Not like to crazy excess, so like pace ourselves, but we went
Right.
just like from bar to bar because it was in Halifax, so they had so much good
right.
music,
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
nice.
yeah, yeah. You could feel like you're in Ireland a little bit.
Oh man, it was
All the
so
trad music.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then inevitably every time we would meet some very drunk Irish person who would tell great stories. And,
That's awesome.
anyways, invite us to visit them in Ireland, whatever. But today I went to St. Patrick's Basilica, which is in downtown Ottawa.
yeah.
So if you've never been, it's a beautiful, beautiful basilica, and I mean, it is Irish. There's like the motif of three everywhere, kind of, the three leaf thingy, whatever.
Right.
Anyways, I just thought, I was like, oh, that's gonna be nice. I'm gonna go to St. Pat's on St. Patrick's Day and like go to mass, and then I'll go do some writing and whatever. And so I got there, the place is jam packed, like packed.
Everyone had the same
That's
idea.
awesome.
Yeah, I
awesome.
didn't know that they do a big thing, but apparently they do a big thing. So I'm coming outside. There's a bagpiper on the front steps who's like bagpiping all
Of
these
course
things.
he is.
Oh my gosh, everybody in the church, so many people had like shamrock ornaments on, or like everybody was wearing their like it was like costumes almost. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
Right.
And then it was a packed place. Usually they would have a reception, which we still can't do because of COVID stuff.
Right.
But normally they would have that. And so Monsignor Kevin gave this like a really lovely homily about, the faith of the Irish, which was great. And then they had the full choir there that was like, and they sang "The King of Love, My Shepherd Is." And I was like,
Oh, yeah, that's a beautiful one.
yeah, so my soul was just exploding, and I was like, this is better than any university time celebration that I would have done in the past.
That's
you go.
amazing.
Mass.
Yeah,
I
wow.
love that.
Yeah, how about you guys? What do you do for St. Patty's Day?
I mean, I went to Western University for like the University of Western Ontario for my undergrad and for law school. And Western, it's like a larger university, and it's kind of known to be a party school. And I'm not a party person so much. Like, I'm just too lazy for that, honestly. But like, it's the truth. But people would start drinking like right away, like literally first thing in the morning. And I lived sort of downtown. There's like sort of student-y areas, student ghettos, maybe like like all over the place. And so on my bus ride to school on St. Patrick's Day, it's just very vivid in my mind. There's like all these frat houses with just everyone's painted kind of green and all kinds of and there's a lot of drinking, and they're already drunk, and it's like 10:30, and that's kind of St. Patrick's Day. But then I was part of like the super awesome, lovely Newman Club on campus, and then so we did our own St. Patrick's Day, which was like, when I think about it, it's like just so cute compared to all that. So everyone
Like cookies.
like everything was green, but no one was drunk, and like I mean, we did have beer and stuff sometimes, but like it was it's nothing. And I think we always had like a praise and worship session at the end of the night or something awesome like that,
as one does on St.
on St. Patrick's Day. So and that was always fun, and people did get festive and did wear green and stuff. But yeah, today was kind of chill for me, but I do love him. I do love St. Patrick.
Can I just say, I just remembered that when I was in elementary school and my mom would pack my lunch on St. Patrick's Day, she would often send me to school with tuna sandwiches or egg salad sandwiches, and every St. Patrick's Day she would dye it green. So the tuna or the egg salad with the mayonnaise would be
amazing,
dyed green, and then I would eat it. It would be awesome.
And did you have like green teeth? Like,
I don't know, because I don't remember looking at myself in the mirror and being alarmed, but my classmates always thought that I was the coolest.
That's awesome. I feel like that does make you cool when you're like 8,
Right.
Like, oh, your tuna is green. That's awesome.
Like, ooh, whoa, that's cool. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What about you, Nicole? What about you?
Yeah, I was trying to remember what my like St. Patrick's Day things are, because I was, homeschooled, and then I went to a Mennonite university that was like a dry campus. So like we had, so I have different stories or lack thereof. But I can remember that for many years, my parents and different friends in Winnipeg would get together on St. Patrick's Day. They would have like St. Patty's Day party, and my mom had like sewn these vests, and she went to like the fabric store and bought these like green and white shamrock fabric, and then made like oversized vests to wear over. And then she and my dad would wear those to this party. And it would be mostly just music making. So people would bring their guitars and their fiddles and all that kind of stuff. And they would just like have some beers and drink and stuff. I was too young. I never got to go to one of those parties, but I just kind of like remember that it was cool and that happened. I don't know. I have really lame stories, you guys.
No, I kind of love it.
But there's some good photos of those pictures. I should see if I can find one and maybe we can share.
That's definitely a party I want to go to. Like for sure.
I know.
That's a party
I know.
want to go to.
Yeah.
People
but
fiddling.
I think, I mean, today, and my sister and her husband and 2 kids, they live in Ireland now. And so I FaceTimed my sister today, and she was wearing green, and they were selling, she had a glass of wine in her hands at probably like, 3 p.m. I don't know. It's like several hours later there. Anyway, so there's celebrations going on there, which is great. But yeah, I went to mass today, which was lovely. And St. Patrick was mentioned. Oh, this is what I was going to say. I know this is what I was going to say. Okay. We had, again, when I was a kid, we had this like VHS series of Catholic cartoon videos about saints by this company called CCC. I don't know what it was stood for. Anyway, so they had one about St. Patrick, and me and my sisters when we were kids were always like, we loved St. Patrick. We had a huge crush on this cartoon St. Patrick,
That's amazing.
And so this morning, my sister, who's a pianist, went and recorded herself just playing the theme from that St. Patrick's Day video from when we were kids and sent it to our family group chat. And it was just, it brought me right back. And
that's awesome.
Like, all the good St. Patrick vibes.
That's
that's
awesome.
So cool.
That's my St.
Like
Patrick story.
That's awesome.
He was like
There's
the
so much
stud of
good
the
stuff,
Saint videos.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like so joyful and cute and cool. And
there's like
actually,
this video. Sorry, go.
No, the thing that I have is like kind of more intense and somber. So you go first.
Okay, mine is not intense and somber. It's just a video that I will post. I will link to it on Instagram or something like that. Of it's a funny one, a cartoon one of some guy talking to St. Patrick, and then St. Patrick is trying to describe the ways of the Trinity, and then the guy keeps calling him a heretic, and he's like, "No, Patrick, that's modalism, you heretic." Like he's like, anyways, do you know what I'm talking
I think
about?
I've seen it. Yeah, it's good.
not.
It's a good one.
Liam posted it. Liam was a guest last year on the
yeah.
podcast. He talked about his experience with OCD, and he posted it. And I remember that when I saw it again today.
That's
I was
good.
like, oh yeah, that's a fun one.
That's
That is
awesome.
good.
Okay, now your intense thing.
Yeah, my
Rachel.
intense somber thing. So I like make my own, like I use notebooks a lot, and I for like organizing stuff. And so I make my own calendar, like monthly calendar in my notebook. And so for the month of March, and sometimes I like just like put quotes in that I like or whatever. And so for this month, the quote that I had picked was from St. Patrick. It's like this poem that's attributed to him. It's a really long poem, so I won't read the whole thing, but it's called "I Arise Today," and it's like really intense.
Oh yeah.
So
Nathan and I prayed that together today, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
I
Did
pray it
you?
every day. Yeah.
Oh no
Do
way!
you?
Do you? Oh my gosh! I did not. This is cool. Okay,
That's
so
awesome.
I didn't really know it at all before I like wrote it in my notebook. So I'm just gonna read the beginning part of it because I think it's really cool. So he says, "I arise today through a mighty strength, the invocation of the Trinity, through a belief in threeness, through confession of the oneness of the Creator of creation." And then it just keeps going, and it's so good. It's just actually so epic.
Yeah.
It's like I love it. So
Love
It
it.
is
The end is
beautiful.
like, salvation is the Lord. Salvation is the Lord. Salvation is Christ. May thy salvation, O Lord, be always with us. It's like,
gosh,
like
Erin,
a
that's
symphony
amazing.
of words. Yeah, I love
Erin's
it.
going to do a dramatic
That's right.
reading of the poem "I Arise Today" and post it on Instagram after.
There you go. Oh yes, please. That would be great. That'd be good.
All right.
Well,
on
you know,
the
it's-
to-do list. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, that is good. Another thing that St. Patrick was reported to, that's attributed to him, is that he banished the snakes from Ireland.
I see where
This
you're
is-
going with this.
You see where we're going with this? Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of snakes, actually, that's kind of our theme today is snakes. So we're going to read a passage from the Old Testament, from the book of Exodus, right? And it is about when the Israelites are in the desert, and they're not super happy. And then God allows, and they're complaining, and God allows snakes to come, and the snakes are biting them, and they're dying. And then they're upset about the snakes. And so, I'll read it. And Moses lifts up the snake, and they have to look at it, and they'll be healed. So, so we're going to read that. So it's this scripture about the source of the pain, for the source of their suffering, right? These snakes became that which brought them healing, right? Aaron, you have a quote that you wanted to share about this, right?
There was like a series from Father Dave Pavanka just called Freedom, I think. And in it, there's the line, the source of our suffering becomes the focus of our faith, which is such a beautiful, yeah.
Right. So that is our scripture today that we'll meditate on and share, what resonates with us. We invite you to do the same. So I'm just going to read it here and then we'll chat. Okay. From Mount Hor, they set, it's hard to read this one. Is it Mount Horeb? Isn't it Mount Horeb? I'm so sorry.
Mount Hor. Okay.
It's Mount Hor. Okay.
Yep.
From Mount Hor, they set out on the Red Sea road to bypass the land of Edom. But with their patience worn out by the journey, the people complained against God and Moses. Why have you brought us up from Egypt to die in this desert, where there is no food or water? We are disgusted with this wretched food. In punishment, the Lord sent among the people serpents, which bit the people so that many of them died. Then the people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned in complaining against the Lord and you. Pray the Lord to take the serpents from us." So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, "Make a seraph and mount it on a pole. And if anyone who has been bitten looks at it, he will recover." Moses accordingly made a bronze serpent and mounted it on a pole. And whenever anyone who had been bitten by a serpent looked at the bronze serpent, he recovered.
Yeah. So that's actually, that was my bad. That one is actually from the book of Numbers. It is Numbers chapter 20. So I think it's verses 4-9. Okay, that's a lie. I'm looking at it. It's from the Saturday, the Office of Readings in the 4th week of Lent. So like about 2 weeks from now, it will come up. And it is Numbers chapters 20 and 21, but they skip a few verses. So I think this is from chapter 21, verses 4-9. So that's, if you're looking at it.
Gotcha.
It's approximately that. There you go.
How does this, what does this make you think of? How does this resonate with you two ladies?
Honestly, one of the first things that struck me when you were reading was, wait, like the Lord, so the people were complaining about, where they were at, which there's so much there even, which is not the part we're focusing on, but I always think about how God leads us into freedom, which is what he had done, right? He's freed them from Egypt, but then freedom is hard sometimes. It's hard. And you forget what enslavement was like, and you start to be like, oh, I hate this whole freedom thing. And I think all of us who have made a decision to follow Jesus and be in relationship with him, when we come across those crosses in our lives or those rough patches, we're like, wouldn't it just be easier to, sometimes you have that thought where you're like, why am I following the Lord if it's going to be just as hard if, or whatever. And so I think it's so understandable how the people were complaining, but then it's this lack of perspective that they had, right? Like you've lost your perspective in that moment. And it was so interesting to me because I don't think I realized, the Lord sent the serpents. That part, I was like, oh, I never noticed that. Like he sort of, and I've never thought about that before. Like, and I haven't really heard any sermons preached about it, or I've never read anything about like, what does that mean that the Lord sent the serpents?
I mean, I think too, with that, I'd never want to think of God as sending suffering, because I don't think that's how that works. And so I remember when I was studying this passage in one of my Bible literature classes in undergrad, and them talking about how, these books are written in the context of the historical understanding of God at the time, which is of God, that everything is directly caused by God. And it's not this concept of of a fallen world, or that
Mhm.
that there's a sinful world and sometimes bad things happen, those kind of
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
And so everything was described as, then God did this, and then God said to do that, and there was not as much consciousness of our own participation in some of the icky parts of the world. So that's just like a little caveat
Yeah.
of that, of like, of that phrasing comes from a
Yeah.
particular
Mhm.
time and a historical context too.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
But that's a hugely important thing, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
yeah,
like if you're ever reading or whatever, like the concept of his, like his antecedent will, that is what he wills directly. And but then there's his permissive will, like what he will
mm-hmm.
allow but he only, even in that, like he only allows things that somehow, I mean, he can transform everything, right? Every bad thing he can transform and have it be like redeeming and redemptive, but he would not allow something if it was not possible for that to be. I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because
Yeah.
like he
Right.
can transform everything on one hand, but he wouldn't allow something that couldn't be redemptive.
But also I
But
wonder,
yeah, this gets
because,
into the whole problem of evil, which is like a
Yeah,
whole other thing. But
that's a
yeah,
whole
sorry, go
different
ahead.
episode. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I wonder if it's not even so much like it's connected, right? Like this, it's not like he doesn't send it. I don't remember the word punishment there or something like that, but like
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and that's not the impression that sort of leaves me, just even as a prayer, like praying with this sort of passage or listening to it in prayer. It's like it almost, and this is not, a scholarly kind of read of it. It's very much maybe a personal or kind of sense of it. But I wonder if it's almost like a wake up call, not in a like, hey, I'm going to send you suffering but like just kind of a reorientation, because the loss over here is like a loss of perspective, and maybe the Lord is like using this situation to recognate everybody, be like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
it's freedom that you were created for, and it's freedom that I'm leading you to, and that this incident is somehow connected with that regaining a perspective here. And I don't know, because yeah, it is suffering, they are suffering, but part of me is just like, I wonder if it's just a story about a loss of perspective and God sort of working through the situation to help them come back to themselves, because it's
Mm.
almost a loss of yourself, I think, when you completely are like unplugged from reality, which is kind of where they were. They forgot why they were in the desert. They forgot what led them out there and what they were leaving and what they were going towards,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it was a long time, right? Like it wasn't like they were in the desert for a week. Like they were in
Yeah.
the desert for 40 years. They were in the
Yeah.
desert for actually generations. Like there was a
Yeah.
generation of people who didn't know Egypt. Like they didn't
Right.
even, they hadn't really experienced that. So then they're born into whatever, they're growing up or they were too young to remember it. And so they're just growing up. And so all they know is this existence, which is like, we get quail in the morning and we get manna, or we get manna in the morning, we get quail at night. That's all we get to eat. We only get to drink fresh water when they tap the rock, and then they get us like, this is the worst. This is the worst.
This is the worst.
Yeah.
But it really is like exactly like you're talking about, Rachel. It's like it becomes possible at some point in our life really to forget the bondage that we were in, and to forget it so intensely that it's like it never even happened. Like to forget it so profoundly that it wasn't even, that we can't even recall what that experience was like,
Right.
And there's historical things. I mean, I was listening to the radio the other day, and they were talking about how the rise of like Holocaust denying is there's a rise of that, of people denying that the Holocaust happened, and that the people who actually were Holocaust survivors, like there's not many of them left because they're getting older and so on. And so that we're forgetting. And when we forget history, then history can repeat itself, right? And I think this is just like a human thing. Like we forget the bondage, we forget the terrible things that have happened, we forget the freedom that we gained, we forget what God did, we forget the repentance, and then we kind of, it's like going through these cycles of repentance and then falling into sin again, and then repentance and then falling into sin again, right? On so many levels.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was reading this, I think what came to mind is, I think it's Mother Teresa, or I'm sure many saints have talked about this, but how the most accurate view of our reality is to see ourselves as sinners and to see also at the same instant through the lens of God's mercy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think of this in the same way, where they would go look at the bronze serpent and they're reminded, like, oh yeah, we were complaining, and now these bad things happen. Like we brought this on ourselves, and in the same instant, they're being healed. And so it's that willingness to look on their own kind of sinfulness, that and that repent. If they're able to be honest with themselves and just kind of face it, then there's healing that comes. And so I don't know. I just think that's a beautiful thing too, that so often I don't want to look at the stuff about myself that I don't like. And I think we have as humans so many very skilled and nuanced psychological defense mechanisms so that we don't have to look at our own stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes, and not only stuff as in like, okay, we all got sort of stuff or things to grow in, but like our own areas of true sinfulness, like that where we're stuck and where we're not whole, but that there's an invitation during Lent to look upon ourselves honestly, and through that for the Lord to start to bring healing into those areas of our life.
Yeah,
There's
true.
Definitely something there, because it is so interesting. I think I love how you said that, Nicole, because that kind of brings a new understanding to me of like the serpent being the thing that brings healing, like that this idea that God is calling us to face ourselves. Like that's really important, and to face what's broken there. And to our maybe surprise, but what his promises to us is that if you do that, I will, like, you'll find that I'm there. You'll find that in your brokenness and your worst places, that's where I'm waiting for you, because that's where I want to heal you. That's where I'm going to bring like this really, really deep healing, because I'm not afraid of looking. I'm not afraid of those places.
Right.
I know those places,
Yeah.
So he's just kind of encouraging us in some ways. Like that's what I heard, and how you sort of read this, like
that we don't have, we don't have to be afraid of our sinfulness, because God is perfectly capable of making us whole. And it takes time, but
it takes time, but it's like, I think part of the challenge of it too is exactly like, if you're looking at, like, picturing this whole group of people, like this whole nation of like thousands upon thousands of people who are in the wilderness, and there are snakes everywhere. Like there are these snakes coming. There's like, you imagine the culture, like the situation that they would have been in, of like
the fear
of like, like, and then to actually have Moses come and say, like, or Aaron, or whoever puts the snake on, I think
Moses,
Moses, okay, good. To have Moses come and say, like, here, we're gonna make one out of bronze, and you have to look at it. Like even just like, I'm actually thinking right now about this conversation that I had with my cousin the other day. We were talking about bugs, because she has this issue with spiders in her backyard, and it's like not just a normal spider issue. It is like these aggressive guys who are so big, and there's so many of them. And she, anyways, so I was telling her about when I was in one of the places that I lived at in Toronto. Toronto had this, like, it was like a centipede infestation. And like, there were actually a couple places, but one place in particular, which was like, they were everywhere, so bad that the roommate that I had would sleep with her light on, because she was too afraid to like have something in there, or anyways, it was awful. Like, I know it's disgusting, but it's that feeling of like, you're
there's
afraid
nowhere safe.
Look, and you're like, there is nowhere safe. Like, you're afraid to look for what you might see, but you're also afraid to look for what you might not see that might be there, and you don't know it's there. And it's like, it's like this impossible situation where there's just fear, and so then somebody is saying, like, no, look at it, like, you have to look at it, that creates this like chasm where it takes incredible strength, like courage, huge courage, to actually look, and to even like leap into this, like, to propel yourself closer to something that is the very source of your horror and your like, it is, and to trust that somehow the good, this is what will bring you freedom, is like,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is harder than we give it credit for, I
Yeah.
think, sometimes.
Totally. I'm thinking of moments in my own walk with different like therapists and counselors and stuff. And I remember a moment a while back, several months ago, where I was talking about a situation with my counselor and just sharing that I felt stuck in a certain situation, and this so because I was afraid that if I made such and such decision, that all these things would happen. And it was so interesting because what she asked me to do is, she's okay, that there's that fear there. And that was where I was like there was tears there, and there was such a fear. She's like, can we sit with that fear for a second? Can we just let yourself really experience what that would feel like? Let's say that you make this decision and you do experience these terrible outcomes. Let's just can we just sit with that for a minute? And it was, everything in me was like, no, like it was like terrified, but also I felt safe enough in this therapeutic context, and I had a really good relationship with her, that I did that. So we sat there, and I cried for a few minutes, and I talked about what this would be like, and I just sort of let myself experience it, and it was awful. Like, it was the worst. But after that, I was no longer afraid of that. It was because I was like, I actually handled this moment. I went through it. I've walked on the burning coals, so to speak, and realized, like, the Lord is with me. The Lord is with me. And just had this confidence. And even at the end of the conversation, she said, whatever you choose, you've now sort of emotionally faced some of this stuff without, before I'd been trying not to think about these things, right? Let myself think about it. So just that, that there's such freedom that comes from allowing ourselves to experience fears and things, like even just on a psychological level, in terms of our human growth and healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another thing that struck me as you guys were kind of sharing about this is the idea that they had to pray. Like, so before, God didn't just automatically like send the snakes and tell Moses, like, construct this other one. It's like the snakes came and then the people had to pray. The people had to be a part of that. The people had to turn back to the Lord, like, voluntarily, right? And then they prayed,
and
they
said
to pray. Well, they
complained
first, and then I think, I mean, this is kind of to go back to maybe a little bit of exegetical principles as well from like Old Testament stuff. They also had a different sense of justice than we do, where it was retributive justice, which is when you do a bad thing, there's a bad consequence, and that was actually considered more merciful than other kinds of justice in sort of some parts of the ancient world. So it was actually a step in the right direction. But like, so the idea might be, and I don't know for sure, but it might be like, oh, they were complaining, and as a connection to this bad thing that they did, there was this bad consequence that happened, which is the snakes that came. And so then they turned back to God, and Moses prays. And then it is huge that when Moses prays, God uses the very instrument, like the reminder of the bad thing that they did, to bring them healing. And the message partly also being like, it's what, Father Pavanka said, like, through some of the most terrible mistakes or sinful actions of your life, if you give them back to God, even having consciously rejected God and consciously walked away from him, if you turn back and you give those moments back to him, like, not only does he take you back, but he can actually bring new life and like transformation through those very acts of terrible things that you did. Right. We see that all throughout the saints' lives, right? Like St. Augustine is a great example, but like so many saints where they had these crazy returning stories back to God, and like, and then all of those parts of their lives were used to glorify God, and were used to bring about new life for them and for others. Like, there's fruit that would be born out of those places, which is
it's crazy. Like, and it can come from because that's the other thing too, is even if you look at this, like, there's like, I could imagine even a sense where they're just so desperate, like it's their desperation is what finally brings them to ask, like, to look at it, to and for us too, I think sometimes it can be like that. It's not like it's not like we have the suffering and then we're like, oh, good, okay, I'm gonna bring it to the Lord. And like sometimes
Yeah.
it's like that, but a
Yeah.
lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's like
Totally.
we're just so good at avoiding it, or just have so much fear, whatever it is, that it takes coming to this place of desperation that the Lord will allow us to kind of come into, so that he can like reach into that and help us look. And then I mean, for um like for those of you who are thinking about, I don't think we've actually explicitly mentioned it, but of course the serpent on the pole is an image of what will come in Jesus and the cross,
Mhm.
right? Like
Right.
it's called like typology, right? So you have this type in the Old Testament of,
Mhm.
you have to look at this serpent in order to receive healing. And so if we're looking at the cross, like this is the place where all of our sin is. It is the place where all of our sin crucified our Savior, and we have a
Right.
responsibility for that. So to
Mhm.
look at that, and to look at, and like
Mm.
it's where all of the sin is that other people have committed that has hurt us. All of their sin is
Mm.
there too. So it's like it's all
Mhm.
there, and we have to, it's like being with Christ and looking at it, like looking at everything that's contained there with him
Mhm.
is like, this is where our healing comes from. But it also is
Mhm.
really difficult, and sometimes it takes us coming to desperate places before we're willing to be there with
Yeah.
him in it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something really practical in that, Erin, that I'm thinking about. Talking with my sister, and um, both of us were going through sort of just hard stuff several months ago, and we were talking, and she was sharing that what she was doing is she just had a crucifix in her room, and whenever she was feeling,
Mm,
just going through her stuff, she would just look at it, just
yeah,
look at Jesus on the cross and
Yeah.
meditate on the wounds of Christ and meditate on that,
yeah.
and how that brought her such consolation and peace. And so I started doing that sometimes when I remember a particularly painful thing that I was going through, and just in this moment, just being like, okay, I'm just going to look at Jesus. I'm just going to imagine Jesus on the cross. I'm just going to meditate on his wounds. And they're coming such like union with him and peace in that, where it was just remembering that what I'm going through, he understands on a
Yeah.
totally
Mm-hmm.
different level, and
Yeah.
I'm not alone in this. This is
Yeah.
and so just
Mm-hmm.
that's also like you're talking about, Aaron, like a beautiful invitation for us to um Jesus became the snake. He's, like you said, he's the typology of that. So we have
Mm-hmm.
him, and we can still look at him on the cross and like
Yeah.
look at an image on the cross. And that
Yeah.
can be a really beautiful thing for us too.
And God reached in, like he reached into the experience of the Israelites and he transformed it. And
Yeah.
this is the whole thing of redemptive suffering, right? Is that suffering, like God entered into our human suffering so deeply that he transformed it, and he married suffering and redemption, you know? So
Mhm.
like it's like when I remember that in my own suffering, somehow it's like it becomes a little bit easier to be there, even if the
Mm,
feeling or the experience of it hasn't changed. It's like because the meaning of it has changed, because Jesus brought a new meaning to suffering,
right.
and it's a meaning of redemption. Like it somehow changes it from being like this place of hopelessness or fear or whatever, to this place of hope, this place of salvation, this place of like
Mhm.
goodness in an impossible way. Like how can
Yeah.
that be,
Yeah.
a man
Yeah.
nailed
Yeah.
to a cross, dying in
Right.
agony, and it's a place of goodness. Like that's
Yeah.
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 oh
I was just talking to Aaron about this before we were recording, but the Abiding Together podcast is going through a Lenten series as well, and they're talking about connections between the Lenten practices and healing, like, and how through each different practice, like fasting and prayer and all these kinds of things, God is doing a work of healing in our lives and like helping us to become more integrated and healed. And I was just thinking, like, the cross really is, and this is the type that's depicted in this Old Testament story, but the cross
mm,
really is just one big act of healing. It's like this big act of love. It's also
Mm,
this just giant kind of healing, this rift between God and us
mhm.
that we created, that we could not possibly solve on our own, and it's kind of just a really cool image in this Old Testament story to see the Israelites in this spot where they're like, we cannot help ourselves. We cannot save ourselves. And then this image that they look on for healing. And then to see Jesus's, his passion, which is what we're working our way to, right, during Lent, as this giant act of healing. And the exciting part is, I think, for us in our Lenten practices, or in our little kind of during the day, I think, looking on the crucifix and uniting our little sacrifices with God's, and being open to the healing that he might be wanting to do in us, through that exchange, and through that relationship that's deepening. And it makes Lent so much more than just, like, I gave up chocolate, or I gave up, not that that's bad. That's wonderful. I haven't, because it's too hard for me, actually. But, I think, it just makes it more exciting to be like, like these little things that I'm doing, Jesus wants to heal me in ways that I don't even know. And, bring new life, and that's really what we're working towards, what we're journeying towards, like the Lenten desert,
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's a good way to end it off, I think, Rachel.
Yeah.
Good.
Bye. See ya.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. See you later. Bye. Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for staying with us in this podcast. And if you have other insights on the scripture, we'd love to hear them. Feel free to send us an email or a message or an Instagram, or however you like to communicate. Thank you. Okay, Erin, I think you have a God wink for us. Yes,
I do have a God wink for us. So I recently, at one of the parishes that's close to me, I noticed that they didn't have any music at the 7 p.m. mass. And I was like, this seems very sad now that we cannot sing all together and stuff. And I think it was just because during COVID, they had like some people who kind of went away and were not coming to mass, even when people were allowed to still, whatever. So I'm doing music there every second week. But the very first week that I did it, I was like, it was the first week of Lent, so I'm doing all the stuff, and this little kid, the whole mass, cute little kid who's like sitting in one of the front rows, he just kept looking at me and giving me the 2 thumbs up and going, good job, good job.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
I love that.
So cute. And so I was like in the Lord, because I was like, okay, Lord, I just need to like, because it feels like a big commitment for me, just with like health wise and stuff. I always want to make sure that I'm very careful with what I commit to, that it's not going to be too much, so that I'm going to have to like renege on my commitments or whatever, So anyways, it was like this little thing of like the Lord being like, no, it's
just keep going. Good job.
Yeah.
Oh,
so cute.
I love that.
And his mom was so embarrassed. She's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Like,
it was.
You're like, please come every week.
Now.
Yeah,
that's right. Exactly.
Oh, that's good. Oh, I love that. Good. Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right, everyone, thanks for listening, and we are looking forward to sharing with you again next week.
Yeah, on metanoia and Peace Tute. And I did not swear. That was sounds like it, but it's not.
Stay tuned. All right. Bye, everybody.
God bless you guys. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough, and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless, and see you next week.